We're filming today in Aspen, Colorado for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Bucky Pizzarelli.
Thank you.
Guitarist extraordinaire. I hate to tell you this, but someone sold you a guitar with too many strings.
No, I've had that for quite a while now, but, you know, thanks to George Van Epps.
Yeah.
Seven-string you're playing. Since 68, 69, I think, that's when I started with it.
Was it a big adjustment at first?
It was. I was doing a lot of studio work, and in the evenings I was doing the Tonight Show. And I went to Manny's Music Store on 48th Street and bought a 7-string Gretsch after I heard George Van Epps play it the night before at a nightclub. And I think about 5 or 6 guitar players in New York City all bought them the same day.
Kidding, you made a big impression then.
Yeah.
They always, it's always the lower string that's added on the 7-string?
Well, there are variations. Lenny Rowe, for instance, has an extra string, only it's a high string. And on the 6th string, actually, sometimes you tune it down to a D. This is a low A. Mm-hmm. So, and I've seen some tuned to low B flat.
A B flat?
Yeah.
Seems an odd note to put on the bottom.
Yeah,
of the
an old friend of mine from Princeton, Bill Priestley, an architect from a very good architect from Chicago, had one a 7-string in 1929.
Wow.
Old Martin, he just put an extra peg up there and put another string up.
Yeah. Did you come from a musical family? Because I know your family now is pretty darn musical.
Oh yes, my 2 uncles taught me how to play, and they told me who to listen to. You know, Benny Goodman's band, and George Van Epps, and Alan Roos, and Charlie Christian, and but they happened to be very good. My older uncle Peter Dominic had a day job, so he never thought of going on a road, but he was very capable of playing with any band in those days. He was an expert banjo player. And my younger uncle, Bobby, did go on a road with Bob Chester, Raymond Scott, Buddy Rogers, dance bands, playing rhythm guitar.
Mm-hmm. So you were a teenager in the early 40s? You were born in 26?
1926, yes.
Okay. So you kind of were right in the middle of the swing heyday.
Well, I was fortunate because of my uncles guiding me, telling me who to listen to, only by way of radio, and a few 78s, mm-hmm. you know, of Charlie Christian and maybe Django Reinhardt. But they were always up on whatever they had to play, that they happened to play it correctly, which was in my favor, because they passed it on to me, mm-hmm. To make sure everything, the bass notes are right and the chords are right.
Did you learn to read music also at this time?
A little then, and then as I got into the band business, I found out what I really had to know how to do. So I jumped on a bandwagon and started to learn what was required. Right. But in those days, mostly was rhythm and a few little solos here and there.
Was Vaughn Monroe your first full-time?
Oh yeah. I was 17. I just got out of high school, and I was about to be drafted. As soon as I turned 18, you know, they were taking them right after 18. You were in the Army in 2 weeks.
This was right at the tail end of the war, right?
Beginning.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm talking about 1943. I went with Vaughn, and I turned 18 in 44. And because I was on a road with Vaughn a little bit, about 3 or 4 months, I wasn't drafted till April. But I got a touch of the band, you know, and I said that's for me.
Yeah. So when you anticipated getting out of the service, you knew what you wanted to do.
Vaughn gave me the job back. I was in the service for 2 years. Yeah. I was in Europe, the tail end of the German War, and then from there I went to the Philippine Islands for 9 months.
What was your role in the
Nah, it was a
military?
PFC. I did nothing but shoot baskets. We had nothing to do with it. The war was over.
Oh,
But we were sitting around Manila doing nothing.
no kidding. Did you get to play at all?
Oh, yeah, we did play a lot,
Uh-huh.
So we listened to a lot of V-discs in
Yeah.
those days, all the best records. I heard Nat King Cole on these big records, they had these large 15-minute transcriptions
Oh,
with a big long arm, and they would play them, and they'd last 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Now that seems like
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
It's like such an annoyance with the LPs now. You gotta
Oh, they were
turn
the
it-
best records. I mean, Vaughn made some V-discs, and in fact, some of the best music is on those things today, if you could ever find them.
Mhm.
But all the great bands made what they call V-discs in those
Yeah.
days.
Doing their part for the
Yeah,
war effort.
yeah.
Yeah. Vaughn Monroe's music was didn't considered jazz.
No,
Was it-
but
was
he
more
had a jazz flair to it. They played some fast tempos, and they had a great arranger there named Johnny Watson, who wrote the theme song, and he had about 25 originals. Take It Jackson and all kinds of Harvard Square, originals. Just little vehicles for the jazz people to play on.
Almost like the Paul Whiteman, they had some hot players mixed in there.
Yeah, but Paul was a little more, I would say, like symphony kind of
Oh,
thing. They were
okay.
more classical. And Vaughn's band had some good players in it. Some real good soloists that we had. We had a great lead alto player, Andy Bagney. The band was built around what he did.
Oh.
Yeah.
What was the work like at that time? Was it dances?
All dance jobs, and we would jump on a bus and go average 200 miles a night or 250. Play in Sioux City, Iowa, and the next you're in another place. Yeah, I was single. It didn't
Yeah.
matter to me. I just jumped on a bus and I was happy to be there.
Right.
It didn't matter. Those long trips never bothered me.
Right. Can I ask you what you were making at that time?
$125 a week. And we did a radio show which paid $60 on Saturday. It was a national show for the Camel Caravan. So that was a lot of money.
At that time, that was pretty good money, right?
You bet.
To do especially what you liked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 Well, after that, how do you make it in the jazz world at that point?
It's hard today because you can go to college today and get a degree in performance, which we were never offered in those days.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that's wrong about that is that the kids are too overtrained, so that if they get a job with the Glenn Miller Band or the Tommy Dorsey Band, they can read those books with their eyes closed after 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
And then boredom sits in if they're not playing any solos, and if that's what they want to be. So there's no place. But the Stan Getz, Zoot Sims, and all the great soloists only played eight measures in those days in the bands. Vito Musso with the Jersey Bounce with Benny Goodman, even Artie Shaw and Benny Goodman. The solos were not ever 32 measures. And if you were given an 8-bar solo, you had to say something in 8 measures, which is very difficult. Today, kids play for a half hour. I don't know what they're saying, but
Well, in the early 50s then, after you, how long were you with Monroe?
oh, I left around 52, 53. Yeah.
So had you started to establish a reputation, or did you have to kind of start from the...
You know what happened? We had, through this radio show, we had a violin section just to play the show with us every Saturday, where they would complement the 6 violins that we had. We'd have another 6 come in. And when we played in New York, half of those 6 violin players were contractors. One would hire the other.
Oh,
So they saw me playing in the band. So when I quit, not when the band folded, really, I went to New York, and the rock and roll thing started hitting. See what they were using a lot of guitar players as opposed to only one, which was the case with the dance bands. So now they needed 3 guitar players, and they would say, "Well, they knew me, so get Bucky," you know. So I was hired to play a lot of recordings because I knew the contractors. Maybe some better players came to town, but nobody knew who they were.
Uh-huh. So you met the right people.
At the right time. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got in on doing some recording on the early rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
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 What did those charts look like at the time? Were they chord charts?
They were mostly rhythmic patterns. One guy playing a tight afterbeat, another guy playing you know, those things,
Sure.
and another guy with a vibrato, you know. And after a while, you know, you say to yourself, we could do that without the music, or fake the bass line with doubling the bass line with what they call a stop sound, you know, boom, 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 boom. You know, you'd put your wrist on the strings and have a muffled sound. And that's what I used to do.
Just that little lick that you were singing reminds me of a Paul Anka song.
Oh, yeah, we made those.
You did those things.
We made a lot of those with it. I made all the records, first 6 records with Dion and the Belmonts. I had Mundell Lowe was on guitar, George Barnes, all jazz guys on those rock and roll records, believe it or not.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Billy Bauer from the Woody Herman Band, O.C. Johnson, Panama Francis played drums, and none of us had those exotic guitars they use that you see on these videos today. We had old-fashioned arch-top guitars with little DeArmond pickups on them.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you listen to some of the early, like especially the Chuck Berry records, that he was into the straight 8th note rock and roll thing.
Oh yeah, you know.
His rhythm section was kind of still playing a swing mode.
That's right.
It's like they're feeling each other, like what's going on here now?
Well, we were on a session. I'll never forget. I know it was Tony Mottola playing guitar, and Saul Goodman was playing drums, and a couple of other guitar players. And it was Paul Simon, believe me. And he kept saying, "I don't like what I'm hearing from the guitars." And he picked up one of our guitars and played these 8th notes like you described. And that's the feel he wanted, but none of us knew how to do it. But he had that in his mind way back when he first started. I don't think these records ever came out, but they might be in the can yet at MGM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he actually had his first duo was called Tom and Jerry, I think.
Yeah.
And he didn't really make it at that point. Maybe that's what.
I actually played with him once. I had forgotten. I had played with so many different people that I had made a record with him, and when he was a guest on a show, on the Tonight Show with Garfunkel, I got a call. I was home, and they said, "We need a bass guitar." And you're the one that made the record, or something. So I had to race in and play that one number with him.
On bass.
On a bass guitar, but it was a 6-string bass guitar.
Oh.
It was an octave lower than a regular guitar, and it doubled the string bass.
Wow. I love listening to the difference in the way they recorded things back then, too, in that the bass wasn't nearly as prominent as in pop music nowadays.
Oh, yeah. It finally got to that Fender bass. It got too loud.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I never liked that.
Yeah. Well, how did you got on the NBC staff?
Yeah, well, at first, I was on about 3 different times at NBC. I mean, when I left Vaughn Monroe, I went on NBC with the Kate Smith show, and I was live 5 days a week. That's how I got the job. The cello player knew there was an opening, and he Brownie, his name was Maurice Brown. He said, "Hey, go up and see Roy Shields. He's looking for a guitar player."
Was this radio you talk about?
No, television.
A live TV show?
Yeah, And I went up, and he said, "Yeah, we need a guitar player. Start Tuesday." So I went up, and I went up and played, I was making $250 a week. It was a lot of money
Just for that show.
just for that show. But you had to do 5 days a week, and then it was so in those days. If you were on staff, other than doing the Kate Smith show, maybe you'd only do 2 or 3 days a week. Still make the same money.
And so you'd have a short rehearsal before
We'd
the
rehearse
show?
in the morning, 11, and we're out of there by 5 or 6 in the evening.
Mm-hmm. So you could play a night, too?
I did. In fact, one of the guests, one of the groups was the Three Sons. They were playing a block away at the Astor Hotel. That consisted of organ, guitar, and accordion. They had a very big hit called "The Peg of My Heart" and "Twilight Time." They wrote the song, a very big song.
Didn't someone record that with words?
Oh, the Platters.
later on?
The Platters, yeah. But they came on, and I had known them because they were guests on the Vaughn Monroe show. And unfortunately, the guitar player was unable to play, Al Nevins, and I jumped in at sub for him. I put on his gray tuxedo, played on his D'Angelico guitar, which I still have. And in the evening, they asked me to play at the Astor Hotel. Everything was a block away. I lived 2 blocks away at the Whitby on 45th Street. Kate Smith was on 44th Street, and the Astor was between us. You know,
just walked to all these
Yeah, I
gigs.
walked to everything.
Uh-huh.
And when Kate Smith's show ended that season, I joined the group as a regular, and Al stayed in New York and hooked up with Donnie. I can't think of his last name offhand, but he became a big publisher.
Uh-huh. This was 56, around
54,
54.
54, 55. And he became a very big publisher. He had like 45 writers coming, Carole King, people like that.
Oh, and the Brill Building?
Not the Brill, the other one, 1650 Broadway.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they
And
just churned out those tunes,
Yeah,
didn't
and
they?
all Al would do was pick up the phone and call Connie Francis or somebody. Hey, well, we need a 10th song, for the album. Boom, they shoot down, and they had demos made. They made them in the cellar of the same building, churn them out.
Yeah.
Neil Sedaka was one of the writers, too.
Yeah.
They all became very, very big,
So if you were to sit and listen to an oldies radio station, oldies meaning, 50s and 60s music, you're likely to hear yourself now and then.
Oh, yeah. Stand By Me, I never realized until they sent me a check because they used the record in a movie. And somehow my son said, "Did you make this record?" And I said, "I don't remember this at all." Because we did it 3 times a day. We were at all the major companies, 10 to 1 in the morning, 2 to 5, 7 to 10 at night, and sometimes a midnight session.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There was a core of people that were, what do they call, first call,
Yeah.
like Milt Hinton.
Milt was there all the time. Milt and Georgia Vivier.
Mhm.
I mean, we had all jazz people. I mean, the drummers were all from the big bands. All from the big bands. And then once they got that eighth note field, they were in.
Mhm.
They were in.
That's really
And
interesting.
the tenor players all had to play those chicken solos, That's what they call them.
The
I know,
chicken
yeah.
solos.
And
How
King
did you
Curtis was the champ, and
Yeah.
Sam the Man Taylor.
How did you guys feel about this music? I mean,
Well, we were making money,
yeah.
and we could play gigs at night, but we got so busy, we had no time to play a gig. No time.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to do on Fridays and Saturdays, I play over in Jersey with a trio, piano, bass, and guitar, all the time. I always had a little thing like that going on the side.
Keep your jazz chops.
Well,
Oh.
not to keep them, but I just did it automatically because I felt that, this is what I like to do, so I'll make some money, support the family and everything, doing the recordings, and go play for, I don't know, $35 or $40 a night to play that kind of music.
Keeps things in perspective, I suppose. And you had a family by this time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They were all grown up, and I tried to make it work, But then in the middle of that whole thing, I got hooked up with Benny Goodman, That changed everything around.
I think that's great because you mentioned, when you were just learning the guitar, that your uncles said, now listen to this Benny Goodman record.
Oh,
and all that.
definitely. Oh, yeah.
And then you end up playing with them.
Oh, that's a big thrill, too.
Yeah.
I always think of that, And I always also think that when I was in high school, on our own time, we had an orchestra. And I played the bass in the orchestra because they had no guitar parts. But if they needed a guitar, I could play it. But we had violins. We might have had 14 violins playing. Every morning, be a half hour before we started class, we were rehearsing. And maybe an hour after school in the afternoon, we were rehearsing again. And I always had the sound of those violins in my ear. So when Vaughn Monroe had those violins playing, I said, I heard this before. And some of the other guys never played with violins. I mean, older guys. So that's an advantage, when you learn something or you get a sound in your head, in your early days. You can only enhance that. It's in your favor.
Yeah. That was something I wanted to ask you about the studio scene that you were so much a part of. What was the racial makeup of the studio musicians at that time? Was there a...
Oh, there were a lot of blacks,
Yeah.
and blacks, and all mixed in. In fact, all the rhythm sections were and they had horn players, and then before we got out of the business, they had a violin section.
Yeah.
But nobody knew who was playing because half the time they never put your name on a record. But if you wanted a good field, you had a great mixture of group, different people.
Right. You had 4 children
Yes.
along the way.
Yeah.
They were pretty musical.
Yeah, every one of them played,
Yeah.
something.
Right. We'll talk about John in a while.
Yeah.
Tonight Show Orchestra. How'd that come about?
Well, because I was up to here with the rock and roll, and I felt it slipping away because those old licks that I knew so well weren't being used anymore, and there were new sounds coming in that I wasn't ready to even try to do it. And I heard some new kids coming up and playing some great solos, and I said, let me get out of here.
When you say new sounds, was it partly technology, new amps, new...
Well, it was the feel of the records changed. But when you listen to those old 50 rock and roll records, that's got one of the greatest rhythm feels ever. I mean, if you want to call it jazz, it's still got that feel. It was airtight, and you couldn't make the record unless every beat was right there. The way they locked it in. And then it became very loose. It became folkish or whatever.
Yeah, less arranged almost.
Yeah. And then the set groups were playing now. They weren't using studio guys. The record companies turned over the studios to a group. Now, the group would sit around all day long trying to make a track, a rhythm track. And nobody could get in. Mitch Miller couldn't get in his own studios down there because some group was sitting there trying to make rhythm track. And there's subtracting and adding. Take this out, put this in. That's all. Waste of time. Big waste of time and money.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to get in on that. So Gene Bertoncini had quit the show and they asked me to do it with Skitch Henderson. It was one of the best movies I ever made because I played better music, and we were featured a lot playing the kind of music that I knew how to play.
Yeah.
Well, Doc Severinsen was in the band. Bob Haggard played the bass. We had Jaime Schertzer played lead alto with Benny Goodman. I mean, the best in the world. You know, and I'm sitting there with Al Klink, who played with Glenn Miller, and Clark Terry, Maxwell, Jimmy Maxwell, Snooky Young. I mean, that band was incredible.
Wow. And what was the schedule like for that show?
We did 5 days a week, but I used to split that up with Tony Mottola was on staff, and he would do 2 nights, I'd do 3 nights. And if we had a recording, I would sub for him. I would go in and do his night, and then he'd make it up another time.
Do you remember any funny or weird instance of Tonight Show orchestra with people coming on that you had to back up?
Well, you know, that show was great. The band was great because we had everybody played whatever they felt when they were asked to do it. So if somebody came on and Skitch would go into something, we never rehearsed. Skitch never rehearsed. We had music up there, and the only time we'd play is when you were off the air. We'd play for the audience, and then you might hear a little of the band. But we were forever just getting there on time from another session, just in time to play the theme.
No kidding. What a life, huh?
Yeah.
You recorded some marvelous duo records. In fact, I think you said some of your best things are duos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite records are the first duo I made was with Tony Mottola. Then I got hooked up with George Barnes, who was one of America's great individual guitar players I ever heard. Nobody played like George. And he was in the studio scene with us. And he was fed up with that, so he always had little projects going on with jazz on the weekend somewhere, and some little project where he arranged something that had a lot of body to it, and Jack Lesberg was involved, I was, George, and then George and I really hooked up when I got my 7-string guitar, because he had been playing duets with Carl Kress, one of my heroes.
And Zoot Sims and Stefan Grappelli.
Oh, yeah.
All those folks. When you got together to do a duo record with some of those people, mostly just talking through tunes, picking out tunes, did you rehearse a lot?
Well, at first I would say with Tony Mottola, Tony took advantage of the 7-string, and we made a couple of beautiful records together because Tony was a very lyrical player. And then the same with George Barnes, and with a different approach. George and I went through a fake book one night out in Jersey with the recording machine going on. Played one tune after another, like just turn page after page. Go into it, play it, and we had enough for about 10 albums. But it was, it was the beginning of the duet. And we finally honed it down. And we made a couple of great albums because we were playing in the evenings. I was playing at the St. Regis. After the Tonight Show, I'd go over there and play with George. And we got some good notices, and we made an album. We made 2 albums. We made one live at Town Hall with McLaughlin, Charlie Bird.
John McLaughlin?
Yeah, he was on the bill. Tiny Grimes, famous Tiny Grimes with a 4-string guitar, played with Art Tatum, Joe Beck, Chuck Wayne, all the same place. But we knew what we were doing. They were, Ultra was there with Benson, and they were all rehearsing in the corner with Major Holly and a drummer, you know, saying, I'm
Yeah.
going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm saying, boy, it's too late for that. Well, that's the way the business is, you know.
Yeah.
But we had a set group, so we went out there and we played they released the album. We had one side of an LP to ourselves, you know,
Right.
from the company knew what we did.
I'm curious, when you're working with two guitars like that, and you are going to be doing some substitution chords or something like that, how do you communicate that with your partner?
You just lay it in there, and all of a sudden, George heard it, bang, he went right with it. That was the beauty of two guitars. It's communication more than preparing. We knew, we perceived what the other was doing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, with George Barnes, sparks used to fly when he was on. Whew. I mean, he used to go into high gear once in a while. I mean, I wish I had a tape machine, but I mean, I remember it all here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when somebody tells me that somebody else is a great guitar player, I says, you better watch out, because I've worked with George Barnes.
Yeah. Makes you play that much better too, right?
Oh, of course. It
Yeah.
it lifts you right up.
Yeah.
And, you know, and sometimes we got serious and we got together, you do this and you do that. Look out, it got fierce.
So you've never worked a non-music job in your life, is that right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, never.
That's saying something.
That's 53 years of playing the guitar.
Right. Well, I have something I wanted to play for you, and I think you'll...
That's George.
better listen.
Oh, that's with John.
Yes.
Well, he got that from George.
You got that from George?
Yeah.
This is wild. That was great how it came out of it.
Yeah. That's George's arrangement.
Yeah?
Yeah. That's what we got that from George.
Uh-huh.
In fact, we sent his widow a copy of this, you know.
Uh-huh. Marvelous.
Evelyn.
It almost sounds like you guys had played some banjo along the way.
Well, that's what it's from. You
Uh-huh.
know, John studied banjo with my uncles, and I, you know, they had that wrist thing going, so you apply it to a guitar, that's what happens.
Well, and John plays 7-string
Oh, yeah.
also.
He played 7-string right away.
He's been getting some
Oh,
great
yeah.
press.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's great. You know, the Pizzarelli name is
Yeah, we're
Maybe out
gonna
there.
do it. We're playing. I haven't played with them that much, but when we do, we go right into it.
mm-hmm.
We can get that thing going right away.
Yeah.
We're gonna play at the Smithsonian this in November. There's an archtop exhibition going on. All the best guitar makers have made blue guitars.
No kidding.
Yeah. And Scott Shinnery from New Jersey owns them all. He commissioned them all, and they're doing a thing in the Smithsonian where we're going to do our own thing, and then maybe play a couple of acoustic duets on the blue guitars.
What's it going to be called? Does it have a name for the
I don't
exhibition?
know. I don't know. It's at Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys probably... I'm trying to think what his attitude would have been to his father when he was coming up. Did he get in some rock bands
Oh,
as a youth?
he had that way before he started playing a 7-string.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a stack of songs he wrote, you know. They're all over the house, lyrics and chord symbols and wah-wah pedals.
Right. Was he influenced by, what, the Beatles or even more recent people?
I don't know, everybody. Chick Corea, I think he liked Chick Corea right away. In fact, that's how I learned Spain. I heard them playing. I said, yeah, I played it on a classical guitar. That's where it's from, Aaron Moy's Concerto, Rodrigo.
Right. What was his attitude towards what you do? Did he realize how much playing you had done up to that point?
Well, he knew, but actually, I think it set in when we played one summer together at the Pierre Hotel. I was playing there with a trio, and in the summer they cut down. They said, "Can you just come in with 2 guitars, make it easy?" And John did it with me, and then he got his baptism of fire there with me giving him the dirty looks, when he hit the wrong chord. And he gave them to me when I did.
Yeah.
But fortunately, he knows he can sit down with a tune and come up with a good set of chords for it. That's what I like about him.
Yeah. Good singer, too.
Yeah, well, he heard all, he heard Nat Cole and Joe Mooney, from Paterson, New Jersey, who was the father of all the right chords for my money.
Yeah. You've had quite a on and off association with Stefan Grappelli.
Yeah,
also.
that was something I never planned on. It's like the same with going with Benny Goodman. You say to yourself, "Wow, here I am with Benny," and I played with Benny a long time. And then to add to that, I was called to go play with Stefan with the Boston Pops, just a duet honoring Joe Venuti, who I had played with until he died. And we did a couple of Joe's tunes, "I'll Never Be the Same," a couple of tunes that he made famous with Eddie Lang. And then our association began because when Stefan came to the United States, he preferred to have an American bass player and an American guitarist. And he left his group back home. And it gave him a different outlook instead of playing the same old stuff all the time. So we had to do what he wanted, but we tried our best to do it.
Speaking of Joe Venuti, were you ever on the receiving end of any of his practical jokes?
Oh, no. I've seen the situations that it got into. In fact, everything carried right to his funeral. I went down and played his funeral, and there might have been 3 or 4 violin players from Philadelphia, all arguing about how he played the ending of a certain tune that they wanted to play for the service.
Yeah.
I said, "Joe must be laughing,
He pulled some good stunts along the way.
Oh, yeah.
I guess a sense of humor helps in the jazz world.
Well, he was a tough guy, He said you couldn't quit his band. He'd beat you up.
Yeah.
And then the only way, when he got sick and tired of the band that he had, they were traveling with cars, he would go around and put signs in different directions so that when the guys followed the signs to certain places, half of the band went one way and the other half went the other way. That's the only way he could break the band up.
That was his way of giving notice, huh?
Yeah.
Send you out in the sticks somewhere. That's good. I had mentioned, read something in Milt Hinton's book about one of the greatest gigs that he ever played. He felt was with you and Bob Rosengarten and Benny Goodman at the Rainbow Room, was it? I think.
Oh yeah.
John Bunch.
Yeah. We played. I remember that we played about 3 weeks there, 3 or 4 weeks, and it was a great rhythm section. And Benny played, of course, and I think Herbie Green was there. Was Herbie on that, too?
I think he did mention
Yeah, and then Lionel Hampton sat in with, Peter Appleyard played vibes. And one night Lionel came in, sat in with us. And Johnny Mercer came up and sang with us one night. So things like that were happening a lot.
And these days, you split your time between going around to these jazz parties and doing recording. What's your got recording session planned coming up?
No, the only records we make now for companies that want to make a jazz record, like Arbor's or the company I used to be with, LRC Records, with New York Swing. It's John Bunch and Jay Linhart, just a trio. And then we add drums, either Bernard Purdy or Dennis McCrell or Joe Cacuso. And but we found out that we can only works better on the road in person with just 3, without the drums.
Yeah. That's a fairly popular, it's been a popular combination.
Well,
jazz
Nat
system.
Cole put it together, and so everybody used it.
Yeah.
Art Tatum had the same thing, and I mean, he did it because they get more money from him as opposed to playing solo piano. They told him, put Tiny Grimes in and Slam Stewart, and according to Tiny, he never told them what tune he was playing. They were just there, and they were making, Art's making big money, and never say anything. In fact, the funny line was that Tiny said, it was a great honor, but it wasn't a great pleasure. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't even tell him what tune he was going to play.
Well, he just got up on the stage and started playing.
I've always wondered what that would have been like to try to keep up with Art Tatum.
Well, I don't know. Listen to the records.
Yeah. Jeez.
I know, but Slam could. Slam had that uncanny knack of whatever was going on. I don't care what. If you're tapping on a tin can, he could make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was the greatest bass player ever. It's the greatest bow soloist I ever heard on a bass. I mean, he had such a beat when he's playing, and his control of that violin. He had the same control of his bow as Heifetz did on a violin. I mean, that's the weapon when you want to evaluate a good violin player. It's how he holds the bow, what control he has on it,
Mm-hmm.
not what he does.
Oh. I want to take you back to a moment for something you were talking about, music education. You seem to say that the musicians were overeducated
Yes,
these days.
overtrained. Well, everybody goes into school and they want to be a soloist today. So they go in, they learn how to read, and they do ensemble playing, and they learn to read so well that when they get with a band, a commercial band, it's boring.
Mm-hmm.
And they could play that, like I said before, without even thinking about it. So when boredom sets in on any musician, you better quit the business.
Mm.
You've got to like what you're doing, and I think the big thing with the dance bands, half of those guys, and I mean this as a compliment, couldn't read well, but they could feel the music. And I know, without mentioning any names, the best guys would sit there and learn the parts. In a week or so, they'd had the whole book down. Plus, when they had to play these 4-measure solos and 8-measure solos, they were gems. I mean, they used to write those solos on in downbeat, so-and-so solo here, he played this on it, and you analyze that. It's incredible.
Yeah, instant classic.
Oh, Billy Butterfield, a great example. All those Artie Shaw solos, all Benny's, Lou McGarity, and Vito Musso on the Jersey Bounce, and the guy that played, I think it was Rollini, Stomping at the Savoy. I mean, they're great solos.
And it wasn't just a matter of playing as many notes as they could in the time they had.
They were swinging all the time. If they weren't, Benny wouldn't have them.
You give them that look.
Well, the look, the look was nothing. The look was an afterthought. Benny would do that.
Yeah. It's the opinions you get about him seem to be very different. Some people felt that he went out of his way to be nasty to them, and other people felt that he just was, that music was
that
just...
was his way of telling you he wanted something. He wanted to get that kick in the pants from you. And if you didn't get it, he would harass you a little bit. See?
Mm-hmm.
I know Sonny. I worked with Sonny Igo, who played with Benny a long time. Maybe one of his last great bands, before he, maybe it might have been the bebop band he had. that Benny looked at him, gave him the bit, and looked at him straight, and Sonny went like this.
Yeah.
And Benny never bothered him anymore. And Benny always used to say, look at the setup and say, drums move a little bit this way, no matter what. And Grady Tate used to go bang and hit a big hard rim shot. I said, leave the drums there.
Enough said. That's good. Oh boy. What's in the future for you coming up?
Well, next week I'm playing with Rosemary Clooney, 2 weeks at the Rainbow Room. And I'm doing that concert with John, and I'm doing a couple of symphony dates with Skitch Henderson in Florida, at Tampa. 4 dates: Clearwater, St. Petersburg, Tampa. I got a big kick out of doing that too. I'm playing things that I used to listen to on record. A score by Victor Young called For Whom the Bell Tolls. It's something that we all used to listen to, when we were young, and say, listen to this, and listen to this, and listen to, the record was worn out at one spot, And 40 years later, I'm playing playing the same tune.
That's marvelous.
So, it's a big kick.
Yeah.
It's something I didn't push, but here I am. I did it 3 weeks ago with Sketch at Carnegie Hall.
Man, you have been around.
Yeah.
Played at the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah, a number of times.
Played there twice, once with Benny Goodman and Buddy Rich, and Milton, Hank Jones.
Good company.
And second time was with Sinatra, with just a small group, Tony Mottola, myself. And,
do you and your son handle business in a different way? The business of music has changed.
well, he's on a different plateau. He gets, John gets big money with his group. So, they go to Brazil, and the bookers, there's enough money, and they draw. That's the secret.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask a guy for a lot of money, and when you get there and there's 20 people sitting in the audience, you got to give that money back. You have to.
You have to give it back?
Well, I'm saying to myself, you didn't draw. You didn't draw the people. So even on the small jobs that I do, I count heads all the time. When I was at the Pierre Hotel, I knew how much it cost each person to get in there,
mm-hmm.
whatever it was. It was on your tab, and I knew I was making money for them. And it reminds me of a funny story of Benny doing a gig down south. He got there, and for somehow everything was loused up. They changed the venue. They had the wrong date in the paper. Everything was wrong. So when he got there, the promoter said, here's your money, whatever it was, $7,000 in those days. He says, it's a total bust. There were 11 people in the audience.
Oh.
And Benny said, never mind, we're going to play. Anyway, played the whole gig. And when it was over, Benny said to the guys, that's the best I ever played.
Those 11 people got the show of their life. Gee.
Yeah, he was like that.
Yeah. He's very professional.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he took care of business. But somebody at the other end allows to set up for you. It's out of control.
Right. Well, I enjoyed listening to you last night in good company here in Aspen, and I was struck by your attack on the guitar. You have a very strong attack.
Well, I feel like that. When I play with the Ross and Ross Tompkins and who's the other piano player who played last night?
Ralph. Sutton and Dave McKenna.
And Dave, yeah. I haven't played with Dave. I haven't seen him in a couple of years. But boy, you get up there and you just forget it. You say, wow, here's something, a difference happening. You know, just sitting there floating, and I can hear him here, and I hear what's going on, and with Poplawski, bringing everything down and it makes you play better. And that's where I get my, I don't know, I start hitting the guitar a different way.
Yeah.
You do that. But if you're all on the level up there, you can't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to play up and down, no matter what kind of tune it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a fast song, it's got to be here sometimes, it's got to be down, it's got to be up.
Yeah, you have to give the listener some levels to...
That's right. You have to build. You have to start with nothing, get up to something, then come down to nothing. And sometimes less is better.
Those are good words. We'll put those in capitals.
No, it is true.
Yeah.
It's the same with an arrangement. If you're going to write an arrangement and all of a sudden the singer sings something and you got the whole band coming in, there's no place for it to go. You got to let the rhythm play for it. Like Count Basie. There's the best example. They start.
Chunk, chunk, chunk.
And all of a sudden, maybe 32 measures later, you're, wah, you know, and it knocks you right out of your seat. That's good music.
Mm-hmm. It's in a sense, it has some similarity to classical music. I know, you know, when you play tapes in your car, for instance, if you play rock and roll, you can usually set it at one volume. And
Yeah,
you can always
that's right.
hear it.
Yeah.
With classical music, sometimes it gets so low that you can't hear it.
That's right. That's right. But it works with an arrangement, and when you look at a score and you see notes and notes and notes where one phrase ends and you see another section picking it up, I can tell a good arrangement as soon as I look at the guitar part. But then I don't know what's going on, and the only way I can help that arrangement, if you're involved with it, take away. Say, don't have this violins come in till 16 measures.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden you get different colors covered in, and then you come right down to where you were.
Yeah. That reminds me of some stories I've heard about Basie.
Oh,
When the
man.
arrangers would come in with their thing, and he'd say, well, this is good, but...
Well, Little Darlin' was fast, and they played it, and Basie suggested playing it real slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. Biggest hit they ever had. Neil Hefti wrote it.
Yeah. You
Great.
imagine Neil Hefti going, now, what are you doing? That
Well,
slow?
he didn't, if you think about it, he didn't interfere with one note on that, or a chord or anything.
Uh-huh.
He just said, play it slower. I mean, does that work?
I guess that was his genius right there.
Of
You know,
course. Basie was a master.
Mhm.
Well, Basie played with Benny, you know, on a couple of records. Airmail Special, I think he's on one of those records.
Yeah. You have any advice for those overeducated young musicians coming out
Well,
of
I
school
mean,
these days?
utilize the education you got, which we never got. Well, we learned hard knocks, you know. Somebody says you're playing the wrong chord and do this and do that. Or sometimes it's costly. You're on a job and you don't get the job back. But you have to learn the repertoire. The repertoire is Jerome Kern, Johnny Mercer, Duke Ellington, Richard Rodgers, Cole Porter, Walter Donaldson, people like that, Harry Warren, and it takes about this much space on your shelf, and for about $5 a piece or $7 maybe now, you can buy everybody's book. That's where it's all at, right in there. All the changes. Learn the song the way the guy wrote it first, and then apply all that slick stuff you learned in school, and sometimes you're going to end up playing exactly the way it's written.
After all is said and done.
That's right. Well, Dave McKenna, best example, how a song should be harmonized. And the hardest thing, harder than writing an arrangement, is to write a set of chords for an arrangement. Say you only have 4 people in the band, and all you need is the right chord and the right bass note. Bobby Scott told me that years ago. He said, you know, I said overnight. I sat up all night trying to figure out where he wanted the bass to go, you know. And you got to look underneath the song itself and say, hey, there's a lot of beauty here. Let's make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like those words, especially at 9:50 in the morning. It's
No, but
pretty good sentiments.
if you want to hear great arrangements, listen to anything Johnny Mandel wrote, or Robert Farnon, who was the daddy of all the arrangers. I mean, he's got a great album, Schwartz and Dietz songs, made in England. Unbelievable orchestrations.
Recent Joe Williams record.
Oh yeah, that's right. He did
Yeah.
Joe's last album. But I mean, he did an instrumental album, and then you hear the melody with either a violin or a trombone or maybe electric guitar playing like George Shearing, a little ensemble with vibes. But what's going on behind them is unbelievable. All correct.
Mm-hmm.
All correct. And then if you're English literature major, buy a book on Richard Rodgers songs, and it's all in there.
All the words.
All the words, without the music. Without the music.
Yeah. I guess that's a mark of a great lyric. If you take the music away and you still have a
Of course. Schwartz and Dietz, all those songs. I guess I have to change my plan and all that stuff. That makes a lot of sense.
You, by the way, you play on one of my new favorite albums, and that is Decime in the Age of Swing.
Oh yeah, I like that concept because it has a Count Basie flair to it, and that was the whole idea.
Yeah.
And we did it in New York State.
Purchase, was it?
Purchase, New York.
Yeah, just the sound of the recording.
Oh, it was done on a stage, an empty theater.
Uh-huh.
You know, and everything was natural.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And we made 2 of those.
Yep.
What's the name of that company, Reliance?
Reference?
Reference.
Recordings.
Yeah, Reference.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for your time today.
Oh, you're quite welcome. We could sit here all day, couldn't we?
We could. We'll probably have to do part 2. Next
Let's
time,
do that.
We will. Next time we're at another festival, and we'll do it. I want it between then and now, though. I want you to write down every recording you ever played on. Okay?
You know, I just got that's something I couldn't do.
I know. I asked Milt Hinton about that too, and you know, they're just hundreds and hundreds, right?
You know, it's the ones that my name doesn't appear.
Yeah.
We made so many records that nobody knows who's playing what. You know, and I'm saying.
Do you suppose that's written down anywhere?
Well, only on the recording itself, on the contractor's list of musicians on a certain date where they were supposed to put the title of the song on the contract.
Yeah. There'd be some archival project for somebody
to
try to straighten all that out someday.
I just met my last recording session was with Tony Bennett taking off Billie Holiday from the Basie band on an old soundy, and me playing along with her, playing rhythm with a New York rhythm section.
Uh-huh.
And they extracted her from the soundy and put her on our track. And then they took her off and made Tony sing a few lines.
Wow. Studio magic, huh?
Yeah, Phil Ramone, he's one of the great engineers in the country, did that. And in fact, I think they made it longer. I'm not sure, but it only ran an hour, a minute and 26 seconds.
Oh.
From the soundy.
Right.
But I was very happy about that. They didn't put our name on a record, nobody's name.
Unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've had a great career, and I'm sure it's got many, many years to go. And
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to doing, keep on playing, you
Yeah.
know. There's nothing else I know how to do.